Well, welcome everyone. This is the team of CreateAWorld. And we get to spend, I think we're very lucky, we get to spend our time every Friday in conversation. And on the last Friday of the month, we get to talk with each other, which is great fun. And so on behalf of the group, welcome to our conversation. So we have had a number of different, very interesting what I would call thinkings going on. And one of the things, I was at the group last night, we were discussing Charles Einstein's Next Stories. And at the end of the call, we started thinking that maybe the key to everything is in being in conversation, right? It's thinking about things differently. It's looking at something from a different perspective. And if we just do that with each other, then it ends up being not just something that happens to us the rest of the day or the rest of the week or the rest of the month, but it happens then that we bring that curiosity and exploration to anyone that we talk to, whether it's our kids or our friends or our partners. And that opens up the world to new possibilities. What's been happening in the different conversations that you've been having this month, my friends?
Okay, I got to jump in here because this one's interesting. So we've all talked about the fact that our actions ripple out, right? And so I think the action of conversation is rippling out in my household. On Valentine's Day, I went out with my beloved for lunch, and he said, "What would you think about interviewing me?" And I said, "Be careful what you wish for." And he said, I'd like people to ask me questions about, what you do. And from my perspective, what that might be about. So here I am on CreateAWorld bringing this up because it's rippling out. And not only that, but he's considering eventually starting his own channel and interviewing others. And so he's been playing around with camera equipment that he hasn't used. And so we're in conversation about that. And also he's wanting to be more in conversation with me. And I haven't found the interface for that yet, other than the whole interview process. So I'm putting that in the fields, that conversation is really up here. And he's also seeing the beauty of what just the action of conversation creates.
Liz, talk a bit about his background. I think it's important to know what he did and
Okay.
and what world he's coming from.
Yeah.
This makes it 100 times more beautiful.
Yeah. So my partner Steve is a Vietnam vet, and he was a medic in the war, and saw many atrocities, and then moved into criminal justice after, and was a police officer for many, many, many years. And then he moved into also fixing airplanes with the Air Force, because he was in the Air Force. And then he worked with the sheriff's department, and then moved into being in security on a community college campus. And now he's moved into a job selling security systems, and he's really in the I'm a beginner stage of doing that. So there's a little bit of imbalance because he's a beginner, but he's rocking it. So the other piece is that for years, he shared this with me the other night, for years, he was the MC at many of the events where 2-star generals would be shifting One would retire, another one would come on, and he would MC those events. And he's done voiceovers. He's done a lot of video work through the Air Force, and he's got this yummy voice. And he's passionate about leadership. He had some of the most incredible leaders in the Air Force that were his role models. And now, things with leadership have really changed. So now he wants to be in conversation with leaders and what that is for them. I mean, I think it'll be a wonderful service to others. And he really wants to interview these people in person, to start with. So coming from that background of, having a passion about really saving others, that's where he began. And then having a passion about being a role model for others, and in the purest sense of that, the most integral sense of that is where he comes from. So I'm really excited because, I mean, look, this being in these incredible conversations, what it's creating. So I'm very excited.
Okay, I'm jumping in because I've been really sick, everybody, and I don't know how long my voice will last. So pardon any coughing, which can look dramatic, by the way. So just prepare everybody for that. I'm not dying. But I had a conversation with Deb's husband yesterday. That's why I'm jumping in. And I'm going to see if I can put it into words because there's so much that can't be said. Let's just say that Russ's whole life, his passion is being an entrepreneur, and his necessity for survival has been working a 9-to-5 job. And finally, the universe moved, and he no longer had a 9-to-5 job. But in all those years that he'd been trying, he seemed to have had an emergent phenomenon of his own passion of self-expression in a way that he sees a through line for his family's survival. A huge deal, maybe about what, 30 years worth, right, Deb? About 30 years. So I'm his coach. And yesterday we were talking, and he was talking about how he wanted to be able to have conversations with parents about how to be with their children in the school system in some way to affect the parents' ability to be who they needed to be in children in a school system that really isn't working for a lot of children. And he started to share stories about how he drives his grandson Caleb to school, and how his principles about how his children and Caleb would be raised. Like, for instance, if they really had a serious matter, he would stop. And he would stop immediately what he was doing, and he would listen fully. And I said to him, Russ, what do you think? What did you learn about how you were being? What did you learn about what you felt that you could do and could be? And he said, well, I never thought about that. I just was busy being it. So fast forward. So I said, well, interestingly enough, one of the people in our collaborators is a school teacher, a teacher that coaches teachers, but she also has another activity, talent, and that is a storytelling theater. She really pulls people's stories out and shows them the difference they make through the telling of their story and their own listening. And I said, I think what we should do is get you and Janice together and let her interview you. I just find it, I think for people that don't kind of live in this kind of weird way of not weird, I shouldn't say that. Like, we've gotten used to something, it's called synchronicity, where something grows organically, where something emerges organically. And when we started CreateAWorld, we started to create a world just to be something, just to be present to each other in a way and in each other's stories not to prove a point, not to teach anything, not to promote anything, but kind of getting back to the basic function of what it is just to be human with each other. And so to see it rising in some of the men is profound, given men, whether we believe it or not, often don't have the voice of their heart available to the public without risk. That's it for me. And I didn't cough. Pretty good.
You know, that brings me to something, because I've been privileged to watch this unfolding with my husband. So there's two pieces about conversation. One is, for me, it has been to know when to not be in conversation. And because Russ is much quieter on a day-to-day basis, less verbal than I am. So you can feel so much going on, but he just, and he'll have like one word that he'll say if you ask him about. Just, it's kind of funny that, but he will engage in conversation. He will talk, share a lot, but I don't know how to explain it. But there's been a lot of just knowing when to just not have conversation. And I've noticed that with him, for him and others too, is just when to just be quiet and watch or witness. And that's not new to me. So I can't explain why it feels new to me lately. But I wanted to mention it. And the other that I want to share, my grandson really is kind of, in some ways, he's a typical teen. He'll walk around and you say, how are you doing? He's like, fine, good. Just a little grunt or just like a stereotypical teen sometimes. And then there's other times he'll just absolutely floor you. The other day, I don't even know what happened. And I expected there to be like one or two words of exchange. And all of a sudden, he's asking me all about my family of origin. We talked for almost an hour and a half. I kept expecting every question or little piece to be the last one. And he kept asking, well, what about this? Well, what about that? What was that like? For an hour and a half. Well, not quite, because somehow, I'm not sure how it shifted, but all of a sudden we were talking about the terracotta warriors and the first emperor of China's tomb and how it's surrounded by a moat of mercury to protect it so nobody can ever get in. I'm not sure how we shifted from one to the other, but I don't even know that there was a specific point. How we tend to think of conversations as, you have a point. But the fact that he just had so many questions and he could hear things about, and he could relate it to a particular part of finding his own self-esteem, taking root in something, is what I saw. And I just was absolutely flabbergasted. And I've had plenty of times when I'll drive him somewhere or whatever, and we'll have this rich 20-minute conversation like what Russ was referring to. But I did not expect him to just hunker in and ask me questions and have an hour and a half conversation about my past. So, and I think the third thing related to those two for me is how essential conversation has been lately, because so much is happening so fast, even on days when it feels like I couldn't really tell you what happened, anything that happened that was notable. It just felt like nothing was happening. But then I look back the next day and something really big had moved somehow. And conversation is like so essential right now to keep being able to weave those things. And yeah, I think that I don't know how to explain that one either. So that's what I want to share for right now.
I just want to say it's so interesting because I really haven't, as you all know, nobody necessarily knows that's watching. You know, I'm on my third week and been out of it, not been in it. But there was this feeling lately from a psychic perspective, and it's the weirdest feeling. It's a psychic feeling, which is different than for me a personal feeling. It's like when I'm reading the collective consciousness of humanity. And all I could think, this one phrase kept coming up. Oh my God, I think people are safe to care again. I've noticed I'm on the verge of tears even trying to say it, because I can't go further than that. That just showed up in yours and Liz's conversation about men being safe to visibly care again.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in again because I had a tutoring session with this young man that is just beyond amazing. He's almost 13, and we were talking about feudalism in Japan and Europe. He was doing a Venn diagram to study that, and we got on the subject of honor. And this young he was really contemplating honor, and for a 13-year-old to be contemplating honor was just stunning. So he was just saying, what about honor, and honoring other people? And out of my mouth spewed, to thine own self be true. Don't know where it came from. I think I know where it came from, but he just kind of looked at me and I said, yeah, honor yourself first. And then we started talking about the whole inner compass thing, and he was questioning, so do you think I have that and do that? And I said, oh yes. I said, and I think you're very special that way. He said, yeah, I think so too. I mean, it was just this incredibly deep, rich conversation that came out of a social studies lesson. So I'm seeing definite evidence of that as well in the males, and both my daughters have significant others, and they're both very deeply caring young men as well. So it's a beautiful thing.
Okay.
Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay. There's something so magical happening for me in this moment of the recognition of men and caring being in the field. For my husband to go for his morning daily treatments and honor the women that provide this for him with laughter and honor their time. He shows up early. It's efficient for them to do their work. He starts the flow of their day and keeps them on time because he shows up early, and they are having conversation with him. And in a system that can seem so out of alignment, he goes in there and creates an alignment and cares about them and requests me to make healthy goodies for them, to appreciate them. And he has conversation while he's getting treatment, which is not common. And some of them give him hugs, and it's such a different kind of dynamic that it's amazing to me to see how our men, as we really start to pay attention to them in a different way, this field of caring that Tantra you spoke of that has opened up, that we're all seeing it happening before our very eyes. And then the ripple back to me of how it just holds me in a different way in relationship too, and the conversation that can come when we give space for them to be. And the other thing, Deb, I remember when my son was a teenager, I would be in my meditation room, just hanging out. And all of a sudden he'd just show up and come and sit beside me. And it would be this flood of deep questions about how to be in relationship with a girl that he was interested in. And how do you know when they're lying to you? And all these kinds of things would come up. And I'd be like, wow, that's a great question. What do you think? How does it feel to you when you're with her? And it's like being with another, giving space, like you said, is just so vital to a field of caring for and about one another. And to feel it rising in the field today is amazing, amazing. I just want to honor the men, because as we talk about in the world of women, how women and the feminine, whatever that is rising. Well, I feel like the men are rising in the honoring of being so creative together. That's what's pinging for me.
You're on mute, Electra.
Yeah, I figured it out. One of the things I've been present to about the men in my life is men with a compassionate heart had a harder time in the past with being able to be themselves. And the men in my family are known for the compassionate heart. My dad, my son, and my grandson. And I think my dad used to talk about, well, he had to learn about sports, in order to be in relationship with other men. My son was lucky enough to be in a work relationship when he was like 18, where the men fathered him. And he learned to be with men in that kind of relationship. And I've seen it the rest of his life. And my grandson has this marvelous opportunity to be at this school. And one of the things that the principal of the school had said to me was that we pay attention to their social skill, their social awareness, their feelings first before we worry about academics. And I've had great conversations with Alden about how that feels, the role he played. One time he was really concerned about a situation his friend had something been done to a friend, and he snuck down and listened at the principal's office. Right now, that would have gotten you and me in like huge trouble. The principal realized that he was there and beckoned him in and made him part of the conversation. And when he talks, I realize that he's not in pain, is what I have to say. That he feels comfortable in sharing, I love you, Grandma. He's comfortable in talking about different things. Not that he might not have done that before, but there's a comfort level in it that did not exist before. And I think it's because he's the system, that school model fits him really well. But when we have our men of compassionate hearts, to give them a place to be their compassionate heart brings me to tears, because they had a hard time of it. I used to have clients who would talk about it to me and saying how hard it was as kids and young adults to be in what was the stereotypical male environment. And if it's opening up for these guys, what's that going to do for how they live their lives now, but coming generations of young men? Because I know that compassionate heart runs in my family. You know, you can see it in the way they father their babies. And actually, I think my father's compassionate heart went to every young man in this 21 grandchildren group. So I think, isn't this marvelous? The world's opening up. And it's us opening up too. I think we used to be separate. You know, we could feel, but they couldn't, sort of deal. And because we've decided to open up ourselves in our own questions, we've left the room open for them to open up into theirs. So it's like, open up, open up, open up.
You know, for those who don't know, you've been leading a really lovely series based on Charles Eisenstein's Old World, New World shift. Or shift from the old world to the new world. And I've been looking for small things. I've been looking the last week or so. What are the tiny, relatively speaking, components or indicators of this shift? And what you just talked about for me is one of actually what all of us have been talking about, is that there's room, however we say it, whether we say women have let go of the story or men have let go of the story or whatever shifted, that men can now move into outwardly expressing their compassionate natures, their deep feelings, their everything we've been naming. That's a real daily indicator for me that the new world is really happening. Yeah, I'm looking forward to how that blossoms. What's the ripple effect into society? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about last night. Was it's one thing to say this was an old story, and it's another thing to recognize the value of what we see rising as the new story for humanity. And the question for us all was, well, how does it happen? How does the transition take place? And I think it takes place like we've been talking in these conversations, in this recognition of the differences occurring. Because when you see it, then you notice it more. And then we reinforce it, like both you and Victoria talked about talking with your children or grandchildren and allowing the conversation. I remember my son used to always wait to come in my bedroom after his sister was asleep. And that's when he'd want to talk. You're going to have these long conversations. One time I asked him, why did you choose this time? Because, of course, I wanted to sleep. And he said, so my sister won't hear me. Well, and she was a typical little sister, you know. And and it's in the listening to each other and the talking that we become present to what is rising. And then you look for it more and more. And the more we look for it, the more we see it, and the more we talk to people about it. So it's an exciting time. I think things are moving very quickly. That's what it feels like to me. The pace of things.
I was too sick to go to meet with my son that I haven't actually seen in 5 years. And my daughter, who hasn't seen him in 3 years, but he is in the States. And just going into this phenomenon of conversation and the value of it at this time, my daughter's at Keno Immigration Center, basically making food, cooking with the immigrants. They support the immigrants in cooking their own food and then distributing it out to the different immigration centers in the area. And she was telling the young woman with her, young mother with her, that she was going to get to see her brother for the first time in 3 years. And she said, I haven't seen my children for 5 years, and it'll be another 5 years before I see them again. And then my son and Leona, and my son's name is Aaron, my youngest son, and but they left the WhatsApp thread open so I could be in on their plotting with each other. And my daughter's not really known for her being emotionally expressive. She's very, she'd make a great general. And any of us that know her well know that. But her first, when she was plotting with her brother for a meeting, she said, now it's even richer because we'll be meeting. I get to go home. I get to go back to the Keno Center and share the story of being with my brother, with this mother. And that's that thing we started with, that rippling out, that rippling out. And she said, I don't know. It's just really I think it's a sweet moment. I think sometimes we work too hard. We've been working very hard to get to this place, I think. And then Deb said something about maybe there is time for listening and silence now. And maybe there is time to let go and see what we really did do that we didn't even know we were doing because of who we were being and the matter, and because of how we cared. Not what's the truth or what isn't the truth, but somehow we couldn't stop caring. And somehow we couldn't stop life mattering. But to see it in those that are coming after you, like my sons and my daughter, because my other son moved to Texas, and they spent a fortune. They have 5 horses, 5 dogs, and 4 cats and 1 bird. And after being there, they wanted to go home to not California, Paso Robles, but they'd done a whole journey around the states, first to Idaho and then to Texas. And then now they just want to go back to where they'd started, like gypsies going out to explore the world and find out what was really home for them, not because of the state or its politics. He's still highly against the politics, but because they had the courage, unbeknownst to themselves, to go through all that money and all those changings of homes, all those resetting, like nomads. And now they're headed back to where, after their journey, where they can rest and where they can be the fulfillment of their journey. But to hear him talk it, I mean, I know that, but to hear him say it, since he's the breadwinner, since he's the one that's having to make sure they don't become financially desolate in all these changes, to hear the honor of the appreciation of the quality of life that the whole family's been searching for is a remarkable thing to me, a remarkable thing. And in the face of really feeling very disappointed in the United States of America and in its governing principles, and not being honored at the level that they were created. But even in the midst of that, they follow their hearts. And I'm glad we're acknowledging this today. It's great to feel it up in the conversation. Our hidden stories, all of us, not even ourselves, but those listening, that we don't realize the value of until we're in each other's presence.
It's so fascinating to me because I decided to stay up late last night to watch a biography of one of my favorite comedians. And I never knew why I was so drawn to him until I saw the biography. I was drawn to his field because he always seemed so innocent. And I'm like, how can somebody who's become so well known and making all kinds of money still be so innocent? And his name's Jeff Dunham. He's a ventriloquist. He's amazing. I think the art of ventriloquism is really exceptional. I mean, what you have to do to be able to be that, and to be so convincing, number one. But he really touched on the fact that he was brought up lovingly. He was adopted, brought up lovingly with two parents who doted on him, but yet spoiled but not spoiled, spoiled with love, which was amazing. He grew up around the same time I did. He's a little younger than I am. And at age 7, he got his first dummy and started in. And of course, a male, in that time, it was in the 60s and 70s that he grew up. And so he said, I was never popular. I was very shy, kind of thing, but always, he was always encouraged to go for his dreams. And in this biography, he really showed his true colors. I mean, he is what you see. He's just this beautiful man who is passionate and driven to be the best that he can be. And he set this goal for himself once he really started going into the circuit with his dummies, that he was going to be on Johnny Carson 10 years after he graduated from college. And 10 years and 1 month later, he got on Johnny Carson. But the main thing is that the biography did show this vulnerability in him. He teared up about his family. He teared up about the connections that he had with people. And just in being in the perseverance of being a male, in this male culture who was different, and who just wanted to be in the art of comedy and ventriloquism. It's just, again, more evidence that this male, compassionate male is rising. And I especially appreciated his vulnerability in this hour-long biography. To be on camera and be willing to just lay it out there and be vulnerable in front of millions of people. So wanted to bring him into the field. You should check him out. He's really funny. His puppets, but he's also on the edge. He does comedy on the edge. He has one of his puppets that's a favorite is Ahmed, the dead terrorist. So that's really on the edge. Yes, on the edge. And he, remember what Middle Eastern country he went to where they said, no, you can't bring this puppet on. So he goes, okay. So he created a brother for Ahmed, because they said you can't bring Ahmed on. He created a brother. And the audiences went wild. They loved it, absolutely loved it. And there were armed guards, He had received death threats, and, brave soul, very brave soul. So yet another male bringing him into the field.
What's his name again?
Jeff Dunham.
Okay.
Dunham.
Okay.
And his I would say his comedy is pretty clean. There's some swearing that his puppets do, but it's bleeped out, on all of his videos. And it's pretty clean. Of course, there's some suggestiveness, but it's funny. I highly recommend it. I've been using that to boost my spirit lately. So
Your screen is laughing, Liz.
yes, it is.
what else do we see rising? One of the things I know I talked about with Kea was what's rising in movies, like the Banshee and Friend. It really did approach the same conversation, but it was with men who were raised in another generation. And in the situation that happened, they used relationship in that movie as a vehicle of journey for each of them. So that the younger man no longer felt he had to just be a nice guy. And the older man get to speak his despair into the world. And in some ways that made the despair less. It's not for the lighthearted movie. But one of the functions that the women played in that was that the Banshees were women who used to foretell death, and sometimes they'd start wailing in advance, so families knew that death was approaching. In this particular movie, the Banshee did not do that. She was a little old lady, and in the beginning, you thought it was just somebody everybody tried to avoid because sometimes, she would take them into long conversations that they didn't have time for. But her presence began to note that change was happening. And like the main character, one of the main character's sisters said, well, I can't live here in this island anymore. And she left. Several characters died. But it was an interesting function for a female to play that role, presencing what was occurring without saying anything, saying something's about to occur. And I'm wondering, what is in us that tells us that's about to happen? Because when I say those words, I get a gut reaction. And I know what that sensing is in me. And I'm wondering if you all see it, either in yourselves or in movies or books you've been reading. I have this Shadow of the Wind is one I'm reading right now, which is an amazing book. And in it, the characters they're all men, and mostly, and they're paying attention to what is catching their attention.
Yeah, I want to respond to that because I've watched 2 long series pretty much in 3 days, given I had nothing else to do except sleep. But one of them is Who Rules the World, and the other one is The Alchemy of Souls on Netflix. But I observed 2 things. First of all, in the conversation about men, the level of thinking that goes on in facing really, really very complex situations, how slowed down the Oriental mind is. And Orientals, they project things 200 years. I doubt as Americans we even project anything 2 days for the most part. So there's a much more slowed down mind. There's much more of a feeling of thinking everything through and paying attention in much more complex ways on behalf of very honorable things, and also on behalf of very dishonorable things. So that was one. But I've actually asked someone who's in a really challenging situation over in Europe, and I know she doesn't have the mind of it. She doesn't have the mind of what she needs to have in that challenging situation. So I actually asked her to watch The Alchemy of Souls, and just to watch one a day and to let it work her, to let it work through a part of her that she doesn't have access to. Like you were saying in that movie, we don't have access to the Banshee in our culture because it's something she's now living, that she needs to know how to understand its parameters and its complexities. and its otherworldliness and its inworldness. And I just noticed how relevant the series was, part one, and how I trusted that for her to watch it while this was going on with her, that she would be able to reflect on experiences that she'd never had, and to be able to use those experiences to bring another kind of wisdom to what is needed in this situation. She just didn't have access to a sufficient wisdom. And I think that's one thing that's really happening in us becoming eclectic, many of us, and becoming maybe even global, is that the way we were raised gives us the capacity to do certain things other people can't do. But the beauty of movies is there are other cultures that have thought in ways we don't think. But when we run into those types of situations, we have those cultures to draw wisdom from, because obviously human wisdom is universal. It's just whether it's tapped or not. And I just keep going back to, I think I had sanctuary in Ohio, when I just kept saying, the new places we'll go to find information will be the movies. That will be what starts to give us the experience. And then the last thing I want to say is, in the conversation with Russ, Deb's husband, I said, it's just so clear to me that there's something profoundly beautiful happening in humanity. Not that people aren't drawn to the drama of it, and the terror of it, but suddenly I can feel it in my clients, and I can feel it in this conversation. I can feel it in Russ's conversation. It's going back to a very foundational relationship with our life, and that is, we want it lived. We want a lived life. We don't want to talk about life. We want a lived life. And something about COVID and the threatening of destruction going on now at an atomic level with Russia, somehow it's triggering in a lot of people this desire to be our stories, to be the value of our stories, not just to tell stories, but to be the value of our stories. And I'm really glad we started CreateAWorld, because I find it coming on, because I'm the one that runs it. Even when y'all don't see me, I'm behind the scenes. I'm the stage manager. It's just been beautiful to be in the conversations and listen to them and know that we're honoring life as lived.
I love how we're talking about movies and TV shows and whatnot that are illuminating things. And I was kind of, to myself, it's almost like something happens, like, okay, wait, I got to go watch this episode to know how to expand myself. And I've actually had that experience sometimes, but I'm just making fun of myself, kind of. But I've been watching this show with my daughter called Blacklist. And on the surface, it looks like typical bad guy, good guy thing, and it's this really bad guy who's got all these fingers into all these crime webs all around the world, and somehow he gets connected with the FBI. And as they go on with the episodes, what I'm struck by is the difference in thinking. And in my perception, the workings of the FBI and the individual agents really reflects the kind of thinking that would have humanity die off. That's just my perception. I'm not saying anything overtly negative about the FBI, because I don't know that much about them.